My daughter looked me dead in the eye and hissed, "Mom, stop embarrassing us!" The room fell silent. Forks paused midair, wine glasses halted halfway. I was still holding my napkin, folded just so on my lap, as if the quiet could reverse what she'd just said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply reached into my purse, unfolded a letter, and began to read. It wasn't a long letter. 1 page, handwritten, neat, carefully chosen words. The kind a man writes when he knows there's no going back. The room watched me, frozen. Emily's husband, Logan, went pale before I even said the first word. He knew what was coming. "I know this letter may come as a surprise, Mrs. Flynn," I read, my voice steady. "But I felt I owed you more than silence. More than politeness at holidays. More than allowing my wife to push you to the edge of the room like furniture." Someone gasped. Emily stood like a statue. Her face, always so composed, trembled just slightly at the corner of her mouth. "I will never forget how you saved me," I continued. "Not just financially, although yes, that loan saved my job, but how you did it without ever asking for thanks or using it as leverage. You simply said, 'Take care of her. That's all I ask.'" I lowered the page. "There's more," I said, "but I think that's enough for tonight." Then I folded the letter, placed it gently on the white tablecloth, and stood. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," I said. "I came here because I was invited, because I thought family still meant something. Clearly I was wrong." And I walked out. The maitre d' offered to call a car, but I waved him off. The cold air felt good. I walked 3 blocks before I realized my hands were shaking. Not from shame, not from weakness, from release. At 78, I thought I'd stopped expecting things from people. But some small, stubborn corner of me still hoped. Hoped that tonight would be different. That maybe Emily would sit beside me. That maybe she'd laugh like she used to. That maybe someone would ask how I was doing and mean it. Instead, I got a public scolding from my own child, like a child. The silence of the street felt kinder than the clinking of glass and forced laughter I'd left behind. I reached into my coat pocket, fingers brushing a tissue I hadn't needed. Not a tear. Not yet. At the corner, I flagged down a cab. "Home?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said. Then after a pause, "Wait, no. Take me past the bridge first. I want to see the water." He nodded. Didn't ask questions. The river was calm, black and silver under the streetlights. I looked out the window and thought of everything I'd swallowed over the years. Every small humiliation. Every time Emily forgot to call. Every check I'd written just this once. That letter had arrived 3 days ago. No return address. Just my name, written carefully on the envelope. I'd read it 3 times, then folded it into my purse, not knowing why I was bringing it tonight. Maybe part of me always knew. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I poured myself a glass of water, sat in the dark and listened to the ticking of the old wall clock. The same one from our first house. The one my husband used to set 5 minutes fast so we'd never be late. Funny. I hadn't thought of him in weeks. Tonight, I missed him. He would have hated that dinner. The phone rang around midnight. I didn't check the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then again at 12:12. This time, I looked. Logan. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my drawer, pulled out my notebook, and began to write. Not about the dinner, about everything that led to it. About the girl who once clung to my legs in fear of kindergarten. About the woman who now flinched when I spoke too loud in front of her friends. About how love, real love, doesn't erase, it remembers. And I wrote one sentence in big letters across the top of the page. This is where I stop apologizing for existing. That night, I didn't sleep. But I wasn't tired. Something had shifted, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, I found my phone face down on the hallway floor. Must have slipped off the armrest sometime during the night. 3 missed calls from Logan, 1 from Emily. No messages. Of course not. She wouldn't leave anything in writing. I made tea, not because I needed it, but because it was what I did. Boil water. Steep leaves. Wait. I stood by the sink, looking out at the back fence. A squirrel darted along the top, like it had somewhere important to be. Everything else was still. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. You'd think I'd be furious. Humiliated. But no. I felt clear. Like when a storm breaks and all that's left is sky. By 9:30, I'd dressed and swept the kitchen floor. At 10, the phone rang again. This time, I answered. Mom. She didn't say hello. I stayed quiet. I don't know what that was last night, but it was completely out of line. Still, I said nothing. Do you realize what you did? In front of Logan's colleagues? In front of the board? You told me to stop embarrassing you, I said. I did. A pause. That letter. That was private. I almost laughed. It was addressed to me. Her voice flattened. Cold. You've always had a flair for drama. No, Emily, I said. You just don't like when I speak. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair and let the silence stretch. She wouldn't call again today. She might not call at all, but I didn't feel punished. I felt finished. An hour later, Logan called. I let it ring once before picking up. Mrs. Flynn, he began, voice low, careful, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Marta, I corrected, a beat. Marta. I waited. I'm sorry, he said, about everything. I didn't think she'd react like that. I wrote that letter for me, not for whatever last night became. It was honest, I said. You don't have to apologize for honesty. I do, actually, he sighed, because I didn't protect you. Protect me, like I was a porcelain dish on the edge of the table. I don't need protection, I said. I just wanted to be treated like a person. He was quiet a long time. I meant what I wrote, he finally said. About the help you gave me, about how grateful I am. I know. He hesitated. I'd like to talk, if that's okay. Just us. When things settle. We both knew when things settle meant never. I don't think that's necessary, I said gently. Another pause. If there's anything I can do, there is, I said. Take care of her. She's not as strong as she pretends to be. He cleared his throat. I will. We ended the call quietly. No promises, no repairs. Just the stillness after something breaks. After lunch, I pulled out the stack of papers I kept in the kitchen drawer. Statements, receipts, transfers. I wanted to see it all clearly. What I'd given, where it had gone. Down payment on their house, tuition for private school, legal fees, grocery money, car repairs, emergency vet bills, and birthday checks, always with a handwritten note. Proud of you. Love, Mom. I'd been generous. Not to buy love. Just because I thought that's what mothers did. But a mother shouldn't have to prove her worth with deposits and dishes and quiet obedience. I made a list. Not of what I'd given, but of what I would no longer do. I would no longer wait by the phone. I would no longer say, it's okay, when it wasn't. I would no longer accept silence as a substitute for love. I would no longer fund disrespect. Then I made another list. Shorter, but harder. I will open the curtains every morning. I will make tea for one and drink it slowly. I will walk to the corner bakery on Fridays and buy something sweet. I will call Rebecca, my granddaughter, not to check in, but to say I miss her laugh. I will take up space. I will not shrink. I sat back and let the paper sit in my lap like a declaration. Not war, not revenge, just clarity. That afternoon, I sorted through a box of old photographs. Me in my 20s, holding Emily as a baby. My husband's crooked smile. The first Christmas tree in the old house. I didn't cry. But I did hold the photos longer than usual, like they were little mirrors of who I'd been. Around 5, the phone buzzed again. A message. Rebecca. Grandma, what happened last night? Mom won't talk about it. Logan looks like he's been hit by a truck. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I typed, I'm okay, sweetheart. Just starting a new chapter. I'll tell you about it soon. And I meant it. The next morning, I didn't make tea. I opened all the windows instead. Let the chill in. The kind that stings your hands just enough to remind you you're alive. The kind my mother used to say clears the corners of the house. I stood in the center of my living room, the room where Emily took her first steps, where her father once slow danced with me to a scratchy old record, and I said aloud, "You're not invisible." Just to hear it, just to be reminded. I hadn't spoken to anyone yet, not since Logan's call. Rebecca's message had been the only warmth. She didn't ask for explanations. She asked if I was okay. And I was. More than I'd expected. By mid-morning, I found myself at the kitchen table, a notebook open in front of me. Not the kind with recipes or to-do lists, the one I kept locked in the desk drawer, the one with the truth. I began listing everything I'd paid for in the last 20 years. Emily's graduate school tuition, the roof after the hailstorm, Logan's dental work when his insurance lapsed, ballet lessons for Rebecca, plane tickets to their second honeymoon. A loan just for a few months, never returned. Monthly transfers to help bridge the gap. I didn't write with bitterness, just clarity. I needed to see it. All of it. At the bottom, I drew a line and wrote, respect, not included. I stared at the words until they stopped vibrating. Around noon, I walked to the post office. The young man behind the counter looked surprised to see me. I usually only come in around holidays, but today I needed stamps and envelopes. I had letters to write. The first was to my lawyer, not about revenge, about boundaries. The second was to my financial advisor. The third, and hardest, was to Rebecca. I didn't know how much she knew, if she'd heard the fight, seen the fallout. But I wanted her to hear from me, not through whispers over dinner or texted summaries. I wrote, "Sweetheart, I'm fine. Truly. What happened wasn't sudden. It was just the first time I didn't let it slide. You don't need to choose sides. Just know I love you. I always have. Let's get lunch soon. Just us. I want to hear about your art. Love, Grandma." I walked home slowly, stopping to smell the last of the neighbor's roses. Red, stubborn, blooming out of season. When I got back, I found an envelope pushed through the mail slot. No return address. My name written in sharp, practiced letters. Inside was a single piece of stationery. Cream-colored, heavy. It was from Logan. Just a few lines. "I understand if you don't want to hear from me again. But for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. Thank you for speaking now." No signature. Just that. I folded the note and placed it next to the letter from the night of the dinner. 2 pieces of truth. 2 sides of a man caught in a house built on silence. That evening, I pulled out the good plates. The ones Emily never wanted to use because they looked too old. I cooked myself a full dinner. Roasted chicken, carrots with honey, and a slice of the pie. I froze back in spring. I poured a glass of wine, sat alone at the table, and I ate slowly. Each bite a quiet rebellion, each sip a toast to every time I said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt human. That night, I lit a candle and placed it in the window. My mother used to say it was for travelers, lost ones, or those who needed to find their way back. I wasn't waiting, but I left the light on anyway, just in case. The next afternoon, I took the letter and walked across the street. Gloria lived in the yellow house with the peeling shutters and the front porch that leaned slightly to one side, like it was tired of standing but too polite to fall. She was 79, twice widowed, sharp as a tack, and never apologized for speaking her mind. When I knocked, she opened the door without hesitation. "Well," she said, hands on hips, "look who finally stopped by. Come in, Martha. I've got a pie cooling and gossip waiting." She didn't need to ask if something was wrong. Gloria always knew. We sat in her kitchen, which still smelled faintly of onions and sugar. She poured sweet tea into mismatched mugs and waited. "I read something out loud the other night," I said. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "Was it scandalous?" "Apparently." I handed her Logan's letter. She read it in silence, mouth pursed, eyes scanning quickly. When she finished, she folded it in half and slid it back across the table like it was evidence in a trial. "Well," she said again, "he's got a spine." "Who knew?" I chuckled. "He does," I said, "but only in secret." Gloria didn't sugarcoat, never had. "And Emily?" she asked. She exploded. "In public. Called me an embarrassment. Told me to stop making scenes." Gloria shook her head slowly. "What is it with daughters? You raise them with both hands, and when they get to solid ground, they pretend they never needed pulling." I nodded. There was no self-pity between us, just truth spoken plainly. "I keep thinking about how I used to braid her hair," I said. "Every morning, before school. French braid. Tight, neat. She never once asked me to stop. Not even in middle school. She just let me." "She let you love her," Gloria said, "until she didn't need it anymore." That stung more than I expected. Not because it was harsh, because it was accurate. We sat for a while, listening to the old clock tick and the occasional rattle of a car down the street. Gloria broke the silence. "So what now?" I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't know. "I'm not angry," I said. "I just feel done. Not with life. Just with being edited out of theirs." Gloria nodded slowly. "You're not a guest star in their story, Martha. You built the first chapter." She stood, walked over to the hutch, and pulled something from the drawer. A small, leather-bound planner. "I keep a running list," she said, handing it to me. Inside were pages marked with dates and columns. Emily, $250 school books. Logan, $1,200 retainer loan. Rebecca, $400 camp, house repairs, $7,000. "Every dollar," Gloria said, "every act of love, I write it down, not because I expect it back, but because I refuse to let them pretend it didn't happen." I stared at the neat handwriting. "You keep receipts." "I keep truth," she said. That night, I started my own book. I didn't just list the money. I listed the hours spent in waiting rooms, the nights I stayed up when Rebecca had the flu, the rides to the airport, the phone calls where I listened, even when I wasn't heard. It wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering that I'd existed in their lives as more than background noise, that I'd held them when they cried, that I'd answered the phone every time, that I'd mattered. I ended the entry with one line. "Love doesn't disappear, but sometimes it goes quiet until you call it back by name." The next morning, I received a text from Rebecca. "Grandma, I'm coming by tomorrow. I don't care what they say." I wrote back, "I'll have tea ready." And I meant it. Rebecca arrived just after noon, carrying a grocery bag and a nervous look. "I brought scones," she said, holding out the bag like a peace offering. "From that place you like, with the flaky kind." I took it gently. "Thank you, sweetheart. Come in." She slipped off her coat, eyes scanning the living room like it had changed since the last time she'd been here. It hadn't. Same lace curtains, same oak rocking chair, same faint scent of lavender and old books. We sat at the kitchen table, the way we used to when she was little, and convinced my sugar cookies were magic. For a while, we just ate and talked. Light things. Her work, her roommate, a new class she liked. I let her fill the space. Then she set her tea down. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she said softly, "for how they treated you, for not saying something sooner." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "I didn't do anything right either." Her voice cracked a little, and suddenly she looked so young again. Not the confident 23-year-old with sharp eyeliner and sharper comebacks, just a girl raised in a house that taught her how to ignore a quiet woman. "I heard them arguing," she said. "After the dinner, Mom was furious. Dad tried to calm her down, said he never meant for it to come out like that." I sipped my tea. "He meant what he wrote." "I know," she nodded, "and I think that's what scared her the most." She glanced down at her hands, picked at a chipped nail. "She told me not to come here," Rebecca added. "Said you were being dramatic. Said you were trying to divide the family." I felt something cold move through me. Not shock, just confirmation. "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think you finally said what's been true for years," she said. "And I think that scared all of them." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. "I want you to have this," she said. "I wrote it before I came, in case I couldn't say it out loud." I opened it later, after she left. Her handwriting was hurried, but heartfelt. "Grandma, you were the one who taught me to speak, to use my voice, to tell the truth, even when it shook. You weren't embarrassing. You were brave. They don't get to erase you. Not from our family. Not from me. Love, Rebecca." I pressed the letter to my chest, held it there for a while. That night, I pulled the old suitcase from under my bed, not to pack, just to clean it. To see it again. It hadn't been used since my last trip with George years ago, to that cabin by the lake. I didn't know where I'd go. Not yet. But I wanted the choice. To go somewhere just because I felt like it. To stop waiting for permission to live. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror, not out of vanity, just to look, to see the lines that had deepened, the soft sag of my jaw, the gray at my temples I no longer bothered to hide, and I said out loud, quietly, "You're still here. You're still allowed." Then I turned off the light and let sleep come. The next morning, I opened the hall closet and pulled down the old photo albums. Not the decorative ones on the living room shelves. The real ones. Faded covers, plastic sleeves yellowing at the edges. The ones that smelled of dust and time. I carried them to the dining table and sat with a soft cloth, wiping the covers before opening the first. Emily's baby photos came first. A chubby-faced little girl with hair that refused to stay in pigtails, her gummy smile. Her fingers always reaching. For my necklace, for a spoon, for my face. I turned the pages slowly. Emily at 5, holding a frog with both hands. Emily at 10, arms crossed in front of her chest, defiant after losing a spelling bee. Emily at 13, cheeks flushed with embarrassment as I adjusted her dress before a recital. Each picture, a memory. Each memory, a weight and a wonder. There were no photos of the years between college and her marriage. She didn't send any. Said she was too busy. Said there wasn't much to photograph. I'd asked. She'd always changed the subject. And then Logan appeared, a smile too wide, shoulders too stiff in every group photo. But he had kind eyes, nervous eyes, the kind that always checked the room before settling. I remembered the first time he came over, how he complimented my pie twice, how he offered to help with dishes, even though Emily rolled her eyes and told him not to bother. I hadn't trusted him at first, thought he was too polished, too rehearsed. But that changed the day he called me from a payphone, panicked, embarrassed, desperate. It was late autumn, years ago now. Logan had made a mistake, a bad investment. It had nearly cost him his job. He couldn't tell Emily, not yet. He didn't want to look weak, so he called me. "I don't know who else to ask," he'd said. "I'll pay you back, every cent." I'd given him the money the next day, no conditions, no questions, just one sentence. "Take care of her. That's all I ask." He never mentioned it again, not until the letter. I closed the album and sat back. My tea had gone cold. I didn't reheat it. Instead, I opened the envelope drawer and took out my will. It was old, written back when Emily still visited on Sundays and asked about my garden. When Logan still called me, ma'am. When I still believed that everything I gave would be remembered. The will left everything to Emily. The house, the savings, the small cabin upstate George and I used to escape to once a year. I stared at the page. Then I picked up the phone. "Good morning, Clara," I said when my lawyer answered. "I need to make some changes." She didn't ask why. She just said, "When can you come in?" We scheduled an appointment for Thursday. It gave me 2 days. 2 days to think not just about what I wanted to leave behind, but for whom. That afternoon, I called the bank, asked to speak with someone about canceling recurring transfers. The clerk put me on hold for several minutes before a man with a practiced voice picked up. "Mrs. Flynn," he said, "how can I help?" "I want to suspend all outgoing payments to my daughter and her household," I said. "Effective immediately." A pause. "May I ask why?" "You may," I said. "Because I'm done financing people who don't see me." He didn't respond right away. Just said, "Understood," and promised to send confirmation. It felt good, not vindictive, not cruel, just clean. That evening I lit another candle, not for travelers this time, for me. For the part of me I'd let go dim, for the voice I'd finally decided to use. And as the flame flickered in the darkened room, I whispered, "You're not done. You're just beginning." On Thursday morning, I wore my gray wool coat with the deep pockets, the one George used to call my serious coat. I buttoned it slowly, like it mattered how I walked into the world that day. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, eyes a little sunken, shoulders a little stooped. But something in my face had returned. Not youth, not beauty, just presence. Clara's office was on the second floor of a brick building near the town square. No elevator. I took the stairs slowly, hand on the railing, my breathing even. I'd climbed harder things. Her assistant offered me coffee. I declined. Clara looked up from her desk and gave me a small, knowing smile. "You look well, Martha," she said. "I feel like I finally sat down after standing for 20 years. We went over the paperwork, line by line. The house would no longer go to Emily. It would be held in trust for Rebecca, with clear terms, independent management, and no loopholes for her parents to touch it. The savings account would be divided, a portion to the local library, a portion to a women's shelter I used to volunteer at, and the rest placed in an education fund for Rebecca's future children, should she have any. I signed with a firm hand. Clara watched me for a moment. "May I ask what brought this on?" "Silence," I said. "And how heavy it becomes when you carry it alone for too long." She nodded slowly, and we spoke no more of it. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store, bought things I hadn't bought in years: fresh raspberries, honey from a local jar, a wedge of sharp cheese I used to love but always considered too much for just one person. I didn't hurry. I let people pass me in the aisle. I compared prices just for fun, not necessity. At checkout, the young clerk asked, "Expecting company?" "No," I said, smiling. "Just remembering I exist." She blinked, then smiled back. At home, I unpacked everything carefully, wiping the glass jars and arranging the cheese just so in the fridge. I lit the stove and made myself a small plate: toast with ricotta and honey, a cup of black tea with lemon, and one perfect, fragile raspberry perched on top. I carried it to the porch. It was cold, but I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat anyway. Across the street, Gloria waved from her window, holding up her own mug. I raised mine back. Sometime mid-afternoon, the phone rang. It was Logan again. I answered on the fourth ring. "Thank you," he said. No preamble. "For what you did, for how you did it." I didn't answer. "I know Emily's furious," he added, "but she needed to hear it. We both did." "She told me I was embarrassing," I said. "I know." That was after I stopped paying her mortgage. There was a pause. "I didn't know you were still—" "Of course not," I said. "No one ever knows. That's the beauty of erasing someone. You don't have to feel guilty if you pretend they're not doing anything." He didn't argue. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I know you are." Another pause. Then, "Rebecca's been defending you, even to Emily. She won't back down." "She shouldn't. I told her she gets that from you." Something tightened in my throat, but I didn't let it show. "You're allowed to visit," I said. "But only as a guest. Not as a negotiator." "Understood." We ended the call without tension, without awkwardness. Just two people standing in the same truth, even from different sides. Later, I opened my drawer and pulled out the old quilt I'd tucked away years ago, the one with the fraying edges and sun-faded patches. I unfolded it across my bed. Let the weight of it settle over the room. That night, I slept without waking. And in the morning, the sun hit my kitchen window in a way that made even the dust look like glitter. The knock came just after 10. Not the cautious kind, the hopeful kind. Rebecca stood on the porch in a green jacket too thin for the cold, hugging a canvas tote to her chest. "I brought art supplies," she said. "Thought maybe you'd want to try something weird today." I stepped aside to let her in. Weird sounds perfect. She dropped the bag onto the kitchen table and pulled out a sketchbook, a tin of colored pencils, and 2 small jars of watercolor. "I don't know what I'm doing," I warned her. "Good," she grinned. "Then you can't mess it up." We sat for an hour, drawing nothing in particular. A teacup, a leaf from the backyard, the rim of the sugar bowl. She showed me how to shade. I showed her how to laugh without apology. When our mugs had gone cold again, she set down her pencil. "Mom says you're cutting her off," she said quietly. "Financially." "I am. She's upset." I raised an eyebrow. "I know," Rebecca added quickly. "Not because she needs it, but because she expected it." I nodded. "That's the most dangerous kind of debt, the one they convince you is love." Rebecca didn't flinch. "I think you're right." "I think you've been right for a long time." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. After lunch, we walked around the block. The cold air stung our cheeks, and we laughed at how loud the leaves crunched under our feet. At one point, Rebecca slipped her hand into mine, the way she did as a child, and held it without speaking. "I've been thinking," she said as we rounded the corner, "about legacy. About what we pass down that doesn't have a price tag. Like what? Like how you never let yourself disappear. I stopped walking. She turned to me, smiling softly. I know they tried, she said. To put you in a corner, to make you quiet and small and just convenient. But you didn't vanish, Grandma. You got louder, not noisy, just present. I looked at her and saw not a child, not even my grandchild, but a young woman who was watching me closely, who was learning. I squeezed her hand. That's all I ever wanted, to still be here. You are. That evening, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my journal. Not the financial one, the new one, the one I'd started the night of the dinner. I wrote, "Today, my granddaughter held my hand like it meant something. And I didn't feel like an inconvenience. I felt like a map." I closed the notebook and looked around my little kitchen. The faded linoleum, the humming refrigerator, the window with one cracked pane, and a view of Gloria's porch. None of it had changed, but I had. No letter could have done that alone. No outburst, no call, no apology. It had taken the quiet days after, the ones where I chose what to keep, what to release, and what to reclaim. Later that night, I lit my candle again, not for anyone else, for me. Because sometimes a woman needs to see herself by her own light. The next morning, there was an envelope taped to my front door, plain white, my name in Emily's handwriting, rushed, slanted, as if the act of writing it had burned her fingers. I peeled the tape off slowly and brought it inside. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter and made tea first. Strong this time, no sugar. When I finally unfolded the letter, I read it in silence. Mom, I don't know what you think you accomplished, but I hope it was worth it. You humiliated me. You hurt people. You've turned Rebecca against me. You've always had a way of making everything about you. This was no different. I don't understand why you've chosen to make this the hill you die on. We could have fixed things. Quietly, privately. But you needed a scene, and now you've made your point. Congratulations. Emily. No love, no sincerely, just her name, drawn like a signature on a legal complaint. I folded it once, neatly, and slid it into the drawer next to Logan's first letter. Not as a keepsake, but as record. Not because I needed evidence, but because I refused to pretend it didn't happen. I didn't cry. But I did feel something settle in me. Something final. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the sharp, clean click of a door closing after years of standing half open, waiting for a knock that never came. I spent the rest of the morning going through the hall closet, not to clean, but to clear. I filled 3 boxes, one for donation, one for trash, one for memories I wasn't ready to release. Among them, a dress I wore to Emily's high school graduation. Pale blue. I remembered how I'd sat in the sun for 3 hours, sweating, smiling, clapping every time they announced another name. She barely looked at me when it was over, took pictures with her friends, hugged Logan, even then. I held the camera. I laid the dress gently in the 3rd box. Some things aren't about bitterness, they're about honesty. "Around 3, Gloria called. "Heard you got mail," she said, no small talk. I did. "And?" "She's angry. She thinks I've turned everyone against her." Gloria snorted. "You didn't turn them, you just stopped hiding." "She says I made a scene." "Good." That startled me. Sometimes, Martha, the only way to be seen is to stop whispering. She paused, then added, "You didn't destroy anything. You just stopped pretending you weren't in the room." That night, I sat down and wrote my own letter, not to Emily, to myself. "Dear Martha, you didn't disappear. You didn't become small. You didn't let their silence define your worth. You opened your mouth and told the truth. You are not unkind for wanting to be treated with care. You are not dramatic for needing space to exist. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are allowed to take up room. In this house, in this family, in this life. Love, me. I tucked the letter into the back of my journal. That evening, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind press through the bare trees. The moon was a clean silver coin in a deep blue sky. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere, a family was laughing inside their kitchen. I didn't feel lonely. I felt real. And sometimes, that's the greater miracle. I hadn't intended to go back to the restaurant, but 2 weeks after the dinner, I did. Not for some grand gesture, not to relive it, just because I wanted a bowl of their lentil soup, the one with thyme and garlic, and a slice of that thick sourdough they toast just right. I'd loved that soup long before Emily started booking it for business dinners and celebrations. It was lunchtime, quiet, with only a few scattered tables filled. I asked for a corner seat by the window. The hostess hesitated, recognized me. Her eyes flickered just slightly, but said nothing. She simply nodded and led me there. The same table. The table where everything had come undone. I sat down, opened the menu, even though I knew what I wanted. My hands were steady, my breath calm. When the waitress came, she looked about 20, hair in a loose braid, polite smile just a touch too practiced. She set the menu down, then paused. "Were you here a few weeks ago?" she asked gently. I was. She looked unsure, then leaned in a little, lowering her voice. "I just wanted to say, that night, you weren't the one who embarrassed anyone." I looked up at her, surprised. "My mom's like you," she said, quiet, patient. "People forget how strong that can be. Until you speak." She blushed, then added, "Sorry, I saw, and I thought you should know." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "That means more than you know." She brought the soup without a word, and I ate every bite. I didn't look around, didn't search for familiar faces. I wasn't there for that. I was there because I'd spent too many years avoiding places I loved for the sake of people who barely noticed. When I finished, I left a tip twice the size of the bill and walked out into the cold, clean air. The sun was brighter than I expected. At home, I pulled out the letter from Emily again. Reread it. I felt nothing new. No shift. Just the same resigned edge. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. That afternoon, I gathered up the 3 boxes I'd packed earlier and called the local shelter. A woman named Carla answered. I asked if they needed warm coats, unused kitchenware, old books. She said yes, especially the books. "They give people something to hold on to," she said, "even if just for a few hours." I scheduled a pickup for the next morning. Later, I called Rebecca. "I did something brave today," I told her. She laughed. "Did you finally try sushi?" "No," I smiled. I went back to the restaurant. The silence on the line was short. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay." We talked for a while, about nothing and everything. I told her about the waitress, about the soup, about how a simple bowl of something warm can feel like reclaiming your place in the world. Before we hung up, she said, "You sound more like yourself." "I think," I said, "I finally am." That night, I didn't light the candle. Not because I didn't need it, because I didn't need to remind myself I was still here. I already knew. The knock came later than expected. Nearly 7 in the evening. I'd already changed into my house sweater, the one with the stretched sleeves and a loose thread at the hem. I opened the door and found Rebecca standing there with a tote bag and damp hair. "I brought dinner," she said. And no, I'm not taking it back with me, so just say thank you and move. I laughed and stepped aside. She'd brought soup, again, a different kind, and a loaf of fresh bread wrapped in wax paper. We sat at the table like we used to, when she was still in high school and would stop by after a bad exam or a breakup. Halfway through the meal, she looked up. Can I ask something? You don't have to answer. Go ahead. Did you ever feel unloved by her? She didn't have to say Emily's name. We both knew. I set my spoon down gently. Not unloved, I said, but small. Like my love was expected, like oxygen. Necessary, but invisible. Rebecca nodded, slow and heavy. I think she learned to survive by ignoring need, I said. And she mistook that for strength. She calls you dramatic now, Rebecca murmured. I smiled. She always called me something. Rebecca bit her lip. Do you miss her? Yes, I said honestly. But I miss who she was, not who she's chosen to be. She let that sit between us for a while. Later, after we'd cleaned the dishes and she'd taken out the trash without asking, we sat in the living room. She curled up in George's old chair, the one with the patch on the armrest, and watched me with that quiet attentiveness she inherited from my side. I found something, she said finally, reaching into her tote. A story I wrote when I was 10, about you. She unfolded a page of lined notebook paper, creased and smudged. My name was in the title. My grandma, the quiet hero. You gave this to me after I scraped my knee, she said. Said I was brave. I wrote this to say you were braver. She began to read aloud. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs about how I always had tissues, how I fixed broken buttons and hearts with the same hands, how I let her cry without fixing it, how I told her stories without ever making myself the center. By the end, she was blinking fast. So, she said, folding it again, I just wanted to remind you, you mattered to me. Even when they acted like you didn't. I felt something catch in my chest. Not pain. Recognition. I never needed them to make me feel whole, I said softly. But I needed to stop letting them make me feel hollow. She reached across and took my hand. I want you in my life, she said. Always, no matter what she says. I'm grown now. I get to choose. I squeezed her fingers. And I choose you. She stayed late, and when she finally left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt chosen. That night before bed, I opened the drawer with the letters. I took out Emily's, the cold one, and without ceremony, tore it in half. Then in half again. I placed the pieces in the fireplace, lit a match, watched them curl and turn to ash, not as revenge, not to forget, just to free myself from the weight of being misunderstood. Then I wrote a new page in my journal. Love given freely is strength. Love expected without effort is theft. I am no longer for the taking. 2 days later, I took the train into the city. It was something I hadn't done in years, not since George passed. The platform was crowded with people in thick coats, boots tapping across the concrete, phones held up like shields. I clutched my purse and found a seat by the window. The ride was quiet. I watched the landscape roll by. Barren trees, faded billboards, the occasional farmhouse half swallowed by time. I didn't feel nervous. I felt deliberate. Clara's office downtown was smaller than the one in our town. Just her and an assistant who offered me water with a lemon slice. Clara met me in the lobby and led me to a glass-walled room where the light made everything look more serious than it needed to be. She had the revised will in a folder, thick and clean. Take your time, she said, handing it to me. I read every page. Everything was as we'd discussed. Rebecca named as sole beneficiary. A modest trust fund set aside for any future children she might have. Clear language, firm boundaries. No room for loopholes, no openings for manipulation. I signed. And then I asked Clara to help me draft one more document, a letter. Legally binding, not sentimental. Just truth, documented and sealed. It outlined the history of my financial contributions to Emily's life over the years. Loans, gifts, bills paid without request. It stated clearly that no further financial support would be provided under any circumstance. It wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary. Clara looked up from her notes. "You want this filed?" "Yes," I said, "and I want a copy sent to her." "She may respond," she warned. "She may not," I said. "But this isn't about her response. It's about my peace." I left the office with a stamped envelope in my purse and the city wind at my back. On the train home, I didn't look out the window. I looked at my hands, steady, capable, wrinkled but not weak. Hands that had fed, held, written, cleaned, protected, given. Hands that had never taken what wasn't offered. That evening, I sat in the garden with the last of the sunlight spilling across my lap. Gloria came over with 2 glasses of lemonade and no questions. She just handed me one, sat beside me, and sighed like someone who knew the beauty of silence. We watched the sky turn pink and then lavender. "I always thought old age would be quieter," I said. "It's not quiet," Gloria replied. "It's just honest. Finally." I nodded. Later, after she left, I opened my journal. Today, I made a promise to myself to give, not out of fear, to love, not out of guilt, to speak, not to be loud, but to be real. I slept without dreams that night. Because sometimes, peace is louder than memory. On Saturday morning, I woke with an urge I hadn't felt in years to go shopping. Not for anyone else, not for birthdays, dinners, or grandchild recitals. For me. I dressed with more care than usual. Dark slacks, my softest turtleneck, a coat that still held the faint scent of cedar from its hanger. I caught my reflection in the mirror. No lipstick, but I pressed a comb through my hair, added earrings, silver hoops. George used to call them my fighting jewelry. The downtown shops had changed since I last walked those streets. Newer fronts, louder signs, younger staff. But the bookstore was still there. The little one with the uneven floor and the bell that rang when you entered. It rang for me. Inside, it smelled like paper and old wood. The same woman behind the counter looked up, her hair grayer now, glasses thicker, and smiled. "I haven't seen you in a while," she said. "I'm reintroducing myself," I replied. She laughed softly and waved me in. I spent an hour wandering the aisles. I chose books slowly, deliberately. One novel I'd always meant to read, a collection of poems I used to teach in my early 20s, and a slim volume on container gardening. Because why not? When I paid, she placed them in a cloth bag and said, "You look lighter." "I am," I said. Next, I went to the market. I bought things that were entirely for pleasure. Rosemary bread, fig jam, a wedge of goat cheese with cranberries, a bunch of tulips, bright yellow, and a small tin of Earl Grey with lavender. And then I saw it. A silk scarf in the window of a boutique I would have once passed without a second glance. It was soft gray with brush strokes of dark blue, like waves frozen mid-motion. I bought it. No hesitation, no self-scolding, just simple want, met with yes. I wore it out of the store. As I walked home, I passed a mother with a toddler in tow. The little girl looked up at me and waved. I waved back. "Pretty scarf," she said. "Thank you," I smiled. At home, I unpacked my treasures. Placed the tulips in the center of the kitchen table. Lined the books along the side of my reading chair. Set the jam beside the bread, which I sliced and toasted immediately, spreading it thick and sweet. The house felt different. Not quieter. It had always been quiet, but more filled. With me. That afternoon, I called Rebecca. I went shopping, I told her. Oh? For what? For myself, she laughed. Good. I bought a scarf, I said. Silk. Wildly impractical. You'll wear it better than anyone. After we hung up, I sat in my chair and opened the poetry collection. I read until the light changed, until the shadows stretched long across the floor. One line stuck with me. She gathered pieces of herself, others dropped. I wrote it down. Later that evening, I received a text from Logan. I know things won't go back to what they were, but I hope one day we'll be able to sit in the same room again, even if it's just for Rebecca. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I replied, maybe, but only if that room has space for the whole of me. I set the phone down and lit a candle. Not because I needed it, just because I wanted to. A letter came on Monday. Real mail. Postmarked from 2 towns over. The handwriting was unmistakably Emily's. Tighter than before, less flourish. Like she was afraid of slipping. I set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a while. I made myself tea, washed 2 dishes in the sink, and refolded the throw on the armchair before finally sitting down and opening it. Mom, I've read and reread the letter your lawyer sent. I didn't know you were keeping records. I didn't know there was so much I didn't know. I'm angry. Still. But not just at you. At myself. At all the years we let slide between us, like time didn't matter. I'm sorry for what I said at the restaurant. I'm sorry for all the ways I kept you small. She didn't sign off with love, just her name. But it was something. I read it twice. Not for comfort, there wasn't any, but for clarity. She wasn't asking for repair. She wasn't asking for closeness. She was naming the thing between us, and that, at least, was real. I didn't write back, not out of pride, out of choice. Instead, I called Rebecca. She wrote, I said. Did she apologize? She tried. Rebecca was quiet on the other end, then, are you okay? I am, I said. And not because she's sorry. I spent the rest of the morning rearranging the living room. Nothing major, just shifted the couch toward the window, brought the side table closer to the chair where I like to read. I wanted more light, more ease. I moved a framed photo of Emily and Logan off the mantel, replaced it with one of Rebecca and me, the 2 of us in the garden last spring, both of us laughing at something neither of us remembered now. That evening, Gloria came over with leftover apple tart and a deck of cards. We played 2 rounds of gin rummy, and she beat me both times. You're distracted, she said. She wrote, I told her. She didn't ask for details, just nodded and said, sometimes the apology isn't for mending. It's just a map for what you won't go back to. We sat in silence for a while. The house lit with soft yellow lamps. The tart half-eaten between us. Before she left, she looked at me, eyes sharper than usual. You're not waiting, are you? No, I said. Good. Because waiting is how they keep you in the room without ever giving you a seat. That night, I added to my journal. She said sorry, but I'm already home. And I'm not moving backward just because someone opened the door late. I lit the candle again, not out of habit, but as ceremony. I was not bitter. I was not unfinished. I was simply not going back. The morning of my 81st birthday, the sky was clear. No clouds, no wind. Just light. Soft and steady across the windowsills. I didn't wake to balloons or phone calls or the sound of a family clattering through my kitchen. I woke to birdsong. to the creak of the radiator, to my own breath rising slow and full in a house that finally felt like it belonged to me. I made coffee, not tea. I toasted the last slice of rosemary bread and ate it with butter and raspberry jam. I took my time. No rushing, no multitasking. By 9, Rebecca was at the door. She held a small box, badly wrapped in newspaper comics. "I ran out of proper paper," she said, "but I figured you'd like Garfield better anyway." Inside was a necklace. Not expensive, just a smooth stone, sea green, hanging from a leather cord. But on the stone, etched in delicate letters, were 2 words: "Still here." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "So are you." We spent the morning sorting through photos, real ones, printed ones. Rebecca asked questions, pointed at people she didn't recognize. "Who's this?" "That's your great-aunt Lydia. She used to make the driest cornbread in the county but told the best ghost stories." "Is that Grandpa?" "Yes. The year we bought this house. He insisted on wearing that awful corduroy jacket to celebrate." Each story felt like lighting a small lamp. By afternoon, we'd filled 2 pages in her notebook. Names, dates, memories. I saw the shape of our family, messy, flawed, human, beginning to form in her hands. She paused once, pen resting against her chin. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The way it all changed?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "I regret waiting so long to speak." We had dinner on the porch, just the 2 of us. Bowls of pasta, garlic bread, and a small chocolate cake with a single candle. She made me blow it out. I did, and we laughed when the flames sputtered, flared, then finally disappeared. "What did you wish for?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "I've got what I need." That night, after she left, I sat alone in my quiet kitchen. I looked around, at the candle on the sill, at the soft tulips beginning to lean in their vase, at the books stacked by my chair. No photos of Emily, no bitterness either. Just space, just peace. I opened my journal one last time. I didn't burn bridges. I stopped painting them over. Let the cracks show. Let the silence echo. Let the truth be ugly and whole. And in the space that opened, I found a life that looked like mine again. Then I added one final line. If you're reading this, if something inside you stirred, tell your story. Not to be loud, just to be heard. You deserve that. So here's my whisper to you, whoever you are. You're allowed to stop shrinking. You're allowed to stop apologizing. And if no one ever gave you permission to take up space, let me be the first to say it. Take it. Take all of it. And if this story stayed with you, if you saw yourself between the lines, share it. Leave a comment. Pass it on to someone who needs it. Because truth is heavy, but we carry it better together.